I'm Dan St.Yves, and for today's episode of Talking With, I'm still a little ways away from home. We're recording this episode live in Hartford, Connecticut for the 37th Annual National Society of Newspaper Columnists Conference. And another good friend, humorist, colleague, Tracy Beckerman. And she's here promoting a book as well. So I've had the pleasure of knowing you again from the Irma Bombeck Writers Workshop. So this seems to be a bit of a pattern here. I think we met back in 2008. So, but since there, your career has exploded.
In a good way.
In a very, very good way. Your first book did very well, speaking after that at a wide array of writers' conferences, including the faculty of Irma Bombeck. A load of media appearances, including a recent memorable spot on the Today Show that we might touch on briefly here in today's interview. But your brand new book, Lost in Suburbia, based on your syndicated humor column. So let's go back to your column. Like, you're in Dave Barry, Irma Bombeck territory, 400 papers carrying your column, when papers are supposed to be dying. How have you managed to achieve that?
They're not all dying. Years ago when I was trying to figure out if I could do this, if I could make a career out of this, I was saying, well, where am I going to run? Where's my column going to have a home? And I realized that my audience is moms. So what do the moms read? Not much. They don't have a lot of time, but what they do read are the community newspapers.
Yeah.
Because when I first started my column in 2001, they didn't have like Patch and some of these other local media outlets on the internet. So the only way you could find out about what was going on in your town was through your community newspaper. So I said, okay, well, that's how I'm going to reach my audience. So I targeted the community newspapers. And what was great about that, and the reason they're not dying, is because they're weekly papers, and they don't have to kind of keep up with the immediacy of the regular news the way like the New York Times would, you know? So it worked out really well for me. I kind of found my home, and then I just expanded on that, until I had those 400 newspapers.
That's incredible. I mean, I remember the former director of the Irma Bombeck Writers Workshop, Tim Beat, had mentioned that, you're doing great now if you're in 100 papers. So. Yeah. I mean,
you're doing great if you're in one newspaper, honestly.
Exactly.
But I think the most important lesson out of my experience for other writers is to really know your audience and where to find them. Yeah, it really is about, who it is you're trying to reach, I think. And that's a mistake a lot of people make when they are marketing through social media, too. We'll be talking about that later here at the conference. Yeah. But they're just going for sort of the widest possible, I'm going to follow everybody on Twitter, and they'll follow me back, and, get all the people that I can on Facebook, instead of kind of targeting the specific people that you want to reach with your message. So it's important, I think, to know who it is that you want to read your stuff or buy your stuff.
So for the 4 or 5 people that may not have read your column in a newspaper...
well, it doesn't run in Canada.
This is true.
Sadly.
But what... I'm puzzled. I'm not sure what you would write about with a title like Lost in Suburbia. So
the whole title is Lost in Suburbia, a memoir.
Yeah.
How I got pregnant, lost myself, and got my cool back in the New Jersey suburbs. I'm amazed that we've been talking for like almost 10 minutes already. You never even mentioned the fact I'm from New Jersey. Because people can't tell by listening to me that I'm from New Jersey, unless I start talking about the fact that this morning I went shopping at the mall. Because I don't have big hair like Wojo. Actually, Wojo should be from New Jersey. We should switch. So I mean, it's basically all there in the title. And what happened was I had this really cool career in New York as a TV producer, and this amazing apartment, and I was very, shop sample sales, really into fashion. And then I got pregnant, and it all went to hell. I was just throwing up all the time, and I got as big as a house. And, like astronauts could see me from the International Space Station. I wasn't one of those cute pregnant women, and I'm like, well, this isn't what I signed up for. But I popped the baby out after 36 hours, and I went back to work, and I'm thinking, I killed for this career, and I'm not leaving this. And all of a sudden, I just realized that I was missing it. I was nanny taking care of my kid. We're stuffed into this 600-foot apartment. There's like play school things exploding out the windows. And he was starting to walk, and she saw it before I did, and I'm like, this is not how I pictured this going down. So my husband and I sat down, and I said, I'm really unhappy, and he said, I'm really unhappy too. I said, I want to quit my job, and I waited for that like thunderbolt, but it didn't come. And once I quit my job, we didn't have that income anymore. We couldn't stay in New York City. So we packed it up like green acres, moved out to the suburbs of New Jersey. And it just got kind of worse from there. I immediately got pregnant again, and I really did lose my cool. And I don't think I'm giving away too much in the book here, that like sort of my lowest point was when I got stopped by a cop driving in my bathroom. And he said, well, I shouldn't ticket you for making that illegal left turn, but I should definitely ticket you for driving in an ugly bathroom. And I realized that I needed to get my cool back. And the loss in suburbia thing, it's a geographical loss, because I went from being a city girl to a suburban girl. But it was an existential loss, because I went from really being defined by my career and what I looked like and everything to being a stay-at-home mom who didn't feel like I had an identity anymore. And then I felt guilty, because it's like, oh, look, I'm doing the greatest thing in the world. I'm staying home with my kids, and yet I didn't feel like that was enough. So this is, I think, something that a lot of women who leave the workforce, have kids, can relate to. It's this transitional place that you end up in, and kind of finding what your new normal is going to be and how you can feel good about the choices that you've made.
Your first book, was it
Rebel Without a Minivan? Rebel Without a Minivan was a collection of my early columns. Yeah. And this is really a story. It's got a narrative arc, as they say in the business. And it really is about that trajectory that I took in kind of being really cool, losing my cool, and then getting it back again, and what being cool means to me as more of an internal thing, and my struggle to kind of get back into a place where I felt good about what I was doing.
So this is interesting, because typically when people are first starting out, and for any new writers that might be watching this, everybody wants to compile a collection of their columns, but this is more the traditional fiction.
Right.
Using
non-fiction, fictionalized non-fiction kind of thing, the memoir. The collection that I did, Rebel Without a Minivan, was sort of my toe in the water. It's like, okay, this is sort of a safe way for me to try this whole book thing. The columns have already been written. I know they're a success. Let me put them together in a way that makes sense and come up with a cute cover and see how it sells. I self-published that book. And at the time, my newspaper column was only running in New Jersey. So I actually had a lot of trouble getting a book deal, because a lot of the agents and the publisher said, well, you're regional, but it's not a regional book, and you don't have a big audience. I'm like, what, 800,000 readers isn't enough for you? Fine, I'll do this on my own. So I did, with the skills that I learned at the Irma Bombeck conference, because I think you mentioned that when you were talking to Michelle. I learned all about self-publishing and the whole thing, and then how to market that. And I did it so successfully, it was one of the things that helped me get this book deal with a traditional publisher.
Family as your foils, or just anything?
What do I write about?
Yeah.
Well, I never wanted to be just like a mommy blogger. Because eventually what happens is your kids get old, and then they won't talk to you anymore, and you have nothing to write about. So Lost in Suburbia was always about the whole suburban experience, being a wife and a mother, and living in the suburbs and encountering strange things in your backyard and in the supermarket checkout line. And of course, I remember Dave Barry actually spoke at the first Irma conference, and somebody had said to him, what do you always do for material? And he said, you got kids, you got a dog, you got a column. And, it was so true. So, eventually when the kids I started to phase the kids out a little bit, I still had the dog to write about. And then the damn dog died last summer. And I said, we got to get another dog. Now, believe me, I was heartbroken when we lost this dog. I raised the dog and the kids together. But man, I had to write a lot of columns about that dog. They're really funny. He was right. So we got another dog. And now I'm probably going to have to rent some kids, because my son's going off to college. But the whole thing is, I had an experience with my daughter when she was about 7 years old. I had written something about her, and it was personal, and I really was not very respectful of the boundaries. And I had written about the fact that she still slept with a blankie. And so this ran in my local newspaper, and I didn't even think about the fact that all these people in town who know us were reading the column, and they were going to tell this to their kids. So the next day the kids come into school, they see my daughter, they go, you still sleep with a blankie? You're such a baby. And she was so upset, rightfully so, So and I apologized, but I think I still didn't quite get it. And then the next day I'm walking through the school with her, and another mom stops me and says, are you Tracy Beckerman? I read your column, I love it, it's so good. I'm like, thank you. And as we walk away, my daughter says under her breath, another fan for the backstabber. 7 years old, right? So I'm like, okay, I think that maybe I need to pay attention to this. And from that moment on, I didn't stop writing about the kids, but I gave everybody right of first refusal. I'd show them the column beforehand, and if they weren't okay with it, I would either trash it or rewrite it in a way that they were comfortable with. I didn't give my husband the same courtesy, but I at least gave it to the kids. And it seems to have worked out pretty well.
Well, the cool thing we've seen over the years at the Bombeck conferences is the kids speak now for her.
Well, you say kids, her kids are in their 40s.
They're all adults, yeah. But it's neat to see how they had to go through the same thing, and now they've come to embrace it. So I recall a few years ago, and it was kind of interesting watching your reaction online, but your entire blog site disappeared.
Oh, jeez. That was a nightmare. We went away for Christmas vacation. I came back, my blog was gone.
Yeah.
I thought it'd been blog napped or something. I had no idea what had happened.
And how terrifying, just as your career was kind of exploding, because you had the book out, you were building, like social media was just taking off.
Yeah, and you know what? It was, I'm not going to say which blog site it was because I don't want to throw them under the bus, but I could not get anybody to respond to me. I mean, I tried calling, I tried emailing, please help me find my blog, and they're like, what blog? I mean, I thought it was some kind of huge conspiracy. I'm like, did I not pay my blog bill or something? What's going on? And no matter what I did, I couldn't get it back. Now, fortunately, I am somewhat obsessive, and I had copies of all of the blog posts that I had written. I write them in a Word doc first, and then I copy them into my blog.
Yeah.
So I had all of that material, and I didn't repost it when I started my new blog site.
Yeah.
But what it did was it gave me an opportunity as I'm building a new blog to take a look at the branding that I had done on the blog and come up with a new way to design it and add some bells and whistles I didn't have before and kind of rethink it through. Because when I launched the first one, I was such a blog novice. I just threw everything at the wall to see what would stick. And this time I did it much more purposefully.
Very much.
So I was really happy with the result, and it was one of those things that worked out better in the end.
I know when you got it back up, and I believe it was WordPress that you went with when you redid. It looked terrific, and like you say, it very much spoke to your brand.
And I just retooled it again because I feel like you have to constantly keep evolving. Not in a way where you're going to lose your audience because they still need to know who you are, but kind of take them along and keep growing.
This kind of goes back to around the same time that happened, but it also shows how much time has passed since. I remember setting my VCR to record your first appearance on the Today Show, I think it was.
That was right after my first book came out.
And it was not exactly what you were hoping for. Didn't they end up just doing tiny little segments on your closet or something?
Oh no, that was you're confusing two TV appearances.
Oh, okay.
But what had happened was they had seen, a producer from the Today Show had seen my book in the bookstore, and they were looking for 3 people to come on and talk about movies, real people's opinions of the movies. And so they asked me to come on and do like the real mom's take on movies. And they said they wanted me to talk about like 3 movies in the action genre that I thought were like great for moms or really fun or something. And so I came up with like these 3 really goofy movies. One of them was Batman, which I had seen while I was in labor, and like the early stages of about to have my son, and like trying to time my contractions with explosions on screen. So I was just trying to be funny, and the movies weren't that great. And when I got on there, they introduced the segment. We said we have our 3 real people talking about the 3 best movies of all time. And I'm like, oh my god. One of the ones I was talking about was The Pacifier. It was just like not the greatest movie of all time. I'm like, well, punt. And this taught me really about how to be prepared for anything on live television. We have a nice luxury here that you're going to tape this later and edit out all of my ums and likes and and the camera turning off. But which kind of brings us to my recent Today Show appearance, which I know you're going to bring up, so I might as well just beat you to lunch. I went in there expecting to talk about my new book, Lost in Suburbia, a memoir, and have a nice light little conversation. And the host, Hoda Kotb, brings up this like one tiny little incidental piece of the story where my son happens to find my vibrator in my bed when he's 3 years old. And that becomes the whole story on the show. And I'm like, well, this is exactly what I wanted to talk about on national television to 4 billion people or whatever it's going to be. And then I realized just how much it had been seen. Later that afternoon, I went shopping at the mall, and this woman says to me, did I see you on TV this morning talking about how your son found your vibrator in your bed? And I'm like, no, that wasn't me. But I'm sure that woman would want you to buy her book, So, but you have to learn kind of how to go with the flow. Michelle's talking about doing stand-up too. You'll start doing something and you'll get no response from your audience. You're like, okay, this bit's not working. I got to change gears. And it's the same thing with television. But not everybody who's a writer can do stand-up. Not everybody who's a writer can be on TV. And it's really a challenge to go from one format to the other, even from going from writing a column to writing a book. They're all very different.
I remember years ago, I think in Grapevine, first time I met Bruce Cameron, a mutual friend of ours, and he was saying same thing. If you try something and it doesn't work, don't keep doing it.
Right.
Move on. So
that's the same thing with writing too.
Yeah. Yeah,
There are definitely
find
times
your voice.
I've gotten like 2/3 of the way through a column, and I'm just like, it just dies. Like, I cannot make this work, and it's so painful when you're a writer to have to just throw out something that you're writing. Sometimes you can do that.
So on funny, what's funny for you? What inspires you? What do you think is just what has to be there for something to be funny?
Actually, one of the things I learned at the humor conference, the Irma Bombeck conference, is this formula for humor writing, and it goes tragedy plus time equals humor. And I find that a lot of my columns are based on things that go wrong.
Yeah.
In my life, self-deprecating humor, the appliances suddenly exploding, and things like that. People making insulting remarks to me on the supermarket checkout line, and my response to them. Like, there's this one woman, I was buying a whole bunch of groceries for my kids' friends coming over, a bunch of teens. And normally I buy very healthy food for my kids, but this time I had all these teenagers coming over, and I'm buying chips and soda and the whole thing. And this older woman is standing behind me, looking at my food going down the checkout line with this look on her face. I'm like, oh, it's coming. I just know it's coming. Finally she says, childhood obesity is the #1 problem in America. And I just look at her, I'm like, no, actually, people who comment on the food you're buying at the grocery store are the #1 problem in America. And I was like, there's my column, And then all these readers beat me up because here's this nice lady just trying to start a conversation with me, and I had to be nasty to her. And I was like, she wasn't trying to start a conversation. She was putting down my food choices. So it really is about, and there's stuff that I go through at the time, I'm like, this is not funny. And later I'll say, wow, that was really funny. I come downstairs one morning, and the dog had gotten into the garbage and just ate everything and then thrown it all up all over our rug in the family room. And I'm like, this is so not funny, Where's somebody else to clean this up? But then a day later, it still wasn't funny. But 2 days later, it was really funny, especially when I'm coming down, and I couldn't figure out how he got into the garbage either, because it's one of those things you have to step on, and then the lid comes up. And I come down the stairs, and I look into the kitchen. There's the dog with his paw on the thing,
man.
and the open of the can, and he figured out how to open it with his paw and then go in there for the buffet, And I was like, okay, well, these things just kind of write themselves sometimes,
Oh my God. I wish I had more time, but we are definitely ran out of time here, and I'd like to just make sure we
That's
talk
great.
about Lost in Suburbia.
Yep, it's
A
available
memoir.
most
Now
bookstores.
I'm talking like I'm in Texas for some reason.
On Amazon, on my website, lostinsuburbia.com. Please go pick up a copy. It is a great beach read. And of course, I will say that because I'm the author, but I think you would really enjoy it.
I love it. Thanks so much, Tracy, and good luck.
Thank you.
Photobomb.